Welcome to Transfer Talk. With just 7 days remaining in the window, will Chelsea continue to add? What teams need to do more business before the end of the month? We'll assess that and much more this hour. Marcelo Bielsa is Everton's #1 target to replace Frank Lampard if he gets the job. How will that affect their transfer business this month? Also this hour, we'll hear from the Manchester United manager Erik as they prepare for tomorrow's EFL Cup semi-final with Nottingham Forest. So welcome to Transfer Talk. Hello to those of you who are watching on TikTok and on the Sky Sports News YouTube channel. We've got Nubaid, Anton and Kweku still, and we'll go to something that was very popular this morning. With 7 days to go in the window, we highlighted 7 clubs that could be busy with a week to go. If you were watching, you'll notice we've switched it up a little bit. However, we will still start with Liverpool, Anton.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the obvious one. Isn't it really? Let's be honest, the Liverpool season isn't going how they wanted it to, how they planned it to. Coasting towards mid-table, they are 10 points off the Champions League places, and the club faces a decision. Do they invest now in trying to restore their season, trying to get back into those European places? And there's an obvious point, which is the midfield, as you mentioned earlier, Tom. This morning, Jamie Carragher said at the beginning of the month, they don't sign a midfielder, they're not finishing in the top 4. Well, they've actually now gone down the table since then, so that seems like the obvious place to reinforce. You know, if they've got a midfield with some younger players and players at the end of their career, there's an obvious sort of age gap as well in that midfield. So it's not just of what they're missing technically, it's what they're missing for a long-term project as well. So, yeah, it's interesting to see whether Liverpool do that now. We know, obviously, they're seeking investment, so it might not be the right time when it comes to that unless anyone becomes available. But it's interesting to see Liverpool haven't gone down that route so far.
Yeah, what do you all think at home? Get involved. Use the hashtag Transfer Talk. Let us know if your club needs to do the most business between now and the end of the month. And again, like this morning, not just Premier League, EFL, Scotland, whoever you support, get those in. And also in the comments, live on YouTube as well. OK, so Eddie Howe's up there. Nubaid, and you think that Newcastle could still be spending in the last week?
Yeah, I don't think I was very popular for saying Newcastle don't want top 4. So I'm going to have a little reverse on that, because Twitter suggests there's a lot of people who do want top 4. But I think if Newcastle are to chase down top 4, just European football in general, they probably could do with some support in midfield, should they pick up any serious injuries. And then also going forward, I know obviously they've got Alexander Isak and Callum Wilson, but as we know, Wilson's injury record isn't great. And then you've got Alexander Isak, who's just arrived into the Premier League. You can already kind of see that they are starting to wilt, and Almiron's sort of purple patch is now starting to fade away, so they need someone else to step up. And I think, obviously, losing Chris Wood leaves them in a situation that could end up being one that they look back to and go, if only we spent 10, 15, 20 million on a forward in January, we might have found that final nail in the coffin to pinch top 4. Yeah,
loads and loads of people in the YouTube comments, by the way, are saying Liverpool. And actually, a few saying Arsenal as well. Aston Villa coming in as well. I'll tell you what, on YouTube, the comments come in thick and fast. It's quite hard to keep up with them. Here's another one. Liverpool saying that they need 3 more players, and Everton as well. Right, so we didn't have Southampton this morning, Kweku, but you've decided to draft them in.
Yeah, my pick of Man City was fairly unpopular this morning, so I switched to Southampton. There's always a need...
Basically, none of us have got a backbone here, clearly.
Yeah. So from the top of the table to the bottom of the table, there's always a need for a team at the foot of the Premier League table at this point in the season to get business done. Southampton have already brought in Orsic, they've already brought in the midfielder Carlos Alcaraz. They're trying to bring in reinforcements up top. That's where their problems have been this season. There's only 3 teams that have scored less goals than Southampton in the Premier League this year. They've only scored 17 goals at this point in the season, which is worrying for Nathan Jones. They have had some positive results in recent weeks. They are trying to bring in Nicolas Jackson from Villarreal. They're facing some tough negotiations, because Bournemouth are also in for him as well. He's not necessarily the most prolific striker in the world, but he's a handful and he can bring a lot to Southampton's front line. Like I said, they've been struggling to put the ball in the back of the net, and you know you're going to need to do that to stay in the Premier League. So Southampton definitely need to get some business done this month.
I think the forward options they've got aren't great either. Adam Armstrong hasn't quite settled the way they probably would have hoped. 1 goal, 1 assist this season, 1.4 XG. Che Adams, as ever, makes a nuisance of himself and is busy. 1,480 minutes this season, 4 goals, 2 assists, 4.6 XG, and then Mara in there as well, 327 minutes played, 0 goals and an assist. His only Premier League. It is a struggle. You need someone to sort of hit the ground running, which is why I think Jackson is actually a little bit of a rogue shout. Yeah. Hasn't scored many goals for Villarreal, and actually, I think eventually he'll end up playing as an inside forward. He reminds me of like an old Sadio Mane, like explosive, raw, and has that ability, but right now they need goals.
Well, when you look at it as well, they're obviously very familiar with what Danny Ings can do. It's surprising that maybe they did inquire about Danny Ings, but he's a player that would fit the mould perfectly for Southampton, score them goals and hopefully lift them from the foot of the table. But yeah, like you say, they need goals desperately.
Yeah, strong influence from Bournemouth in Jackson as well, by the way. We were just talking about him. Loads more of these comments coming in saying Liverpool, and a lot actually saying that Chelsea need to strengthen still. We know they actually are still trying, though, in fairness, despite the amount of players they've brought in, they are still trying. And then if you go back to the summer, Anton, it was Forest who was signing so many players, but they are still on the lookout as well.
There they are, and Steve Cooper said he wants 2 or 3 more in. They've had injuries, and obviously they're looking to potentially sort of maybe bring in another forward, bring in another defender as well. They brought in Danilo, which I think could be long-term one of the best moves of the window, but it's going to be interesting to see whether they move for a goalkeeper as well. Dean Henderson's out for 5 weeks. Wayne Hennessy's taking the gloves for the next couple of games while they're playing in the EFL Cup. So, we know they've reported today they've got interest in Keylor Navas, who's obviously one of the most experienced keepers in Europe, and Roberto Gagliardini as well, the box-to-box midfielder from Inter, who's an Italy international. So, again, they're looking at both those players are out of contract in the summer. So, do they talk to them now and sign them for the summer? Well, it depends which league they're going to be in, and also do they try and bring them in now? It's going to be a fascinating week, I think, at Forest. At Forest, doing well, they're in 13th, but they're still only 4 points above the relegation places, second worst goal difference in the league as well. So there are obvious places they could strengthen, and obviously expect some players to leave as well. Yeah,
if there's only 6 months left on those 2 players' contracts, you think that they might be able to get them in now if they do. But we do know the Nottingham Forest are trying to get players out of the club as well. So we've just done Forest. Nubaid, that brings us back to you, because you think that agree with a lot of the YouTube viewers saying that Aston Villa need to be busy.
Yeah, I just think they're a bit light going forward. Although Unai Emery doesn't rely on a singular player to score all his goals, he likes inside forwards to contribute, he likes his midfielders to contribute. But when you look at that Villa side, I think they are just generally light. They've got Ollie Watkins, who's obviously scored 4 goals this season, but generally, I think even if you asked Ollie Watkins, what do you pride yourself in? I think he actually prides himself in being a nuisance, in getting his midfielders involved. I don't actually think he's an out-and-out goal scorer. So I think they could do with an extra body in there who can score goals for them, especially because the form they've put together, they're actually, I think, 6 points behind Brighton. And we're obviously talking about Brighton having this brilliant season. And the way this season is going, I'm not saying Villa should or could pinch European football, but you never know. So I do feel Danjuma felt like such a good fit. I thought that would have been a great signing for them. Didn't quite happen, and obviously it looks like he's going to Everton. So I'd imagine Villa will be in the market for another forward.
See Moreno coming at left back. I'm intrigued to see where else that Emery decides is the priority, what he wants to do with this squad, because obviously it's seen investment over the last 2 or 3 windows. It felt like it's building, but they've been 2 different coaches of different players. So is he going to tear it up, or is he just going to try and coach the players he's got and add 1 or 2 more over the next window?
Yeah, there's someone here that says that Chelsea need at least 7 more players. That's not true. I'm not going to take that one seriously. Emma, though, says that Newcastle need to get more signings in to strengthen, so agreeing with you. Nubaid. Peter says that Palace need a number of transfers to energise the side. Mark actually disagrees with the Liverpool one, saying that there's no point at the moment. They should wait until the summer, especially with the ownership situation as well. And Kevin says that Chelsea do still need more players. He doesn't say as many as 7, though. And Thomas says that Leicester are still in need of more signings, which brings us nicely onto you, Kweku.
I'm full agreement. Leicester do need to make some signings. At the back, that's most concerning for Leicester. They recouped a lot of money for Wesley Fofana in the summer. Haven't really reinvested it in the way that Leicester fans probably would have liked. Obviously brought in about face in the summer. He was the only outfield player that they brought in that transfer window, and we know how much reinforcements they need. They're in a different place right now, though, Leicester. They're not challenging for European places. They are seriously in a relegation battle. Johnny Evans is ageing and he's injured at the moment. They need to bring in another centre-back. Soyuncu could be out the door this transfer window. So there's a lot to do for Leicester in terms of at the back. Also going forward, when you watch Leicester this season, they're missing a spark. They need some reinforcements in the wide areas, or maybe a winger to just inject a bit of life into that attack. They're not the Leicester of yesteryear, or like even Leicester from last season. They're struggling massively. So bringing in a couple of players at the back and bringing in a player at the wing, it could definitely help them escape the position they're in right now, because it is dire straits for Leicester. People think they're too good to go down, but if they don't bring in the right players, they could be in serious threat of getting relegated.
Yeah, it was a big win at the weekend for West Ham, though, wasn't it, Anton? That doesn't mean that they don't still want more players.
Well, no, not only that, but, you know, we're talking about Forest signing players, Southampton signing players, Bournemouth signing players. You know, Wolves have recruited well. So West Ham need to keep up. Yes, they beat a poor Everton side at the weekend, but, you know, they're still near the relegation places. Usually West Ham are pretty aggressive in the transfer market. It feels a little different this time around. They've been linked with Moffey from Lorient as a potential striking option. They need to score more goals, even though, you know, Jared Bowen was back in the goals this weekend. Their next games in the Premier League are against Newcastle, Chelsea and Tottenham. So they need someone that's going to put the ball in the back of the net in those games, because they might not get too many chances.
OK, so that was the 7 clubs that we think are going to be very busy, or should be busy, between now and transfer deadline day. Let's get to Tottenham. Huge night for Harry Kane, who moved level with Jimmy Greaves as Tottenham's all-time leading scorer. Speculation over the last few days has increased about his future at the club, with interest from Manchester United and many more. Now, speaking after their win over Fulham, Antonio Conte said that Kane has Tottenham in his heart and he hopes to win trophies together.
For sure, I'd like to help him, me, and also his teammates to try to do something important, no, to win something, something with Tottenham, because Tottenham he loves Tottenham. Tottenham is in his heart, and should be good if together we were able to win something.
So, OK, so Harry Kane there talking about his future, because with 18 months left on his contract, that tends to happen. Of course, we have been saying that Tottenham are hoping to open contract negotiations with him in the next month or so. But there's 3 sides to this. We split it into 3. OK, Anton's going to talk about the player's point of view. We need to know the Tottenham point of view. That's going to come from Nubaid. And if you look at other clubs' point of view, what we know is that Manchester United are monitoring the situation. So Kweku will give us Manchester United's side of this potential deal. So, Anton, just start with Harry Kane. What does he have to consider?
Everything. And that's the thing, isn't it? Without meaning to sound too hyperbolic, but this could be a career-defining decision for Harry Kane. Because, obviously, if he stays at Tottenham, which he may well do, you know, if he decides to sit down with Daniel Levy or any potential new investors that come in and decide, OK, fine, what's the new Tottenham Hotspur going to look like, especially if Antonio Conte leaves in the summer? What's the next project for the next 5 years? How do I fit in? So that's option A. Option B is, look, I'm not going to sign a new contract. I feel like I want to go and challenge myself elsewhere. I want to go and try and win trophies somewhere else. I want to go to a team that may well short-term be better placed to go and win those trophies, and kind of back myself to go and be a sort of, you know, a striker that is in contention for a Ballon d'Or, that can, you know, have a very full trophy. Look, just search social media. All the jokes about Harry Kane and how much he's won are all out there today after Antonio Conte's comments. So, look, the fact of the matter is, Harry Kane wants to be a winner and wants to win at the very highest games. We're playing the biggest games. He wants to go into May, go playing in the biggest games in Europe, and that might not be at Tottenham in the short term. So it's a decision for him, and obviously he's got to decide what to do, what's best for Tottenham. He loves the club. We know he loves the club. So it's a case of, right, actually, is it better if we part ways in the summer? Because you can get maximum cost of him. So he's got to look at it from all perspectives. Yeah, there is a poll on the Sky Sports YouTube channel right now saying, should Harry Kane stay at Tottenham? Simple yes or no. 69% at the moment are saying no. But Nubaid, that's what the player has to consider. What about his club?
Well, naturally, Spurs will want to keep hold of Kane regardless of any situation, and they have proven that they can do that. When Man City came knocking, they made it very difficult for City, and they took their business elsewhere. But as every sort of transfer window goes by, Daniel Levy's sort of chokehold on the Kane situation starts to loosen and loosen, and as we say, he might be out of contract, and Spurs can't get to that situation, because if Kane ends up being a free agent and Spurs lose their record top goal scorer for a free, that'll be embarrassing for Spurs and also Daniel Levy. And we know how much of a smooth operator he is and how difficult he is to do business with. And also, if Tottenham are to sell, they're gonna want big money, and they would probably ideally like to give him to Bayern or Real Madrid. They don't want him in the Premier League, because the reality is, if Spurs give Kane to Manchester United go and win the league, everyone will say Spurs handed them the title, and that becomes a very sort of tricky stipulation. Personally, from my opinion, I think Spurs have to keep hold of Kane. I actually think they've got more power than what they think, because he doesn't have that many options. Bayern and Madrid, I don't think are that attractive to Harry Kane, and then that leaves us Premier League sides, and then if you go through the entire table, you're pretty much just left with Manchester United, who need a striker. And I don't know how attractive that is to him, because are United going to win a league in the next 3 years, or are they going to win the Champions League, the 2 trophies that he probably wants? I don't know. So maybe he might be moving from one project that's in the works to a slightly quicker project that's in the works. Doesn't mean he's definitely going to win anything.
Also, from Tottenham's point of view, they might have a new coach, a new head coach in the summer. Okay, so that's a lot to deal with. You look at the players that have excelled this season. The likes of Romero and Bentancur, they're Conte players, and then you've got Hugo Lloris, and there's question marks about his long-term future. That's a spine of a team, and you lose Harry Kane as well. You're like, well, what is Tottenham next year? That's what they need to define. That's why these talks with the player are so important, because not only do they need to sort of, think about, right, what is the next 2-3 year strategy, but they also need to convince Harry Kane, you are going to be the guy, and this is where we're going. This is the long term. No more short-term managers if we don't stick with Conte. This is where we're going. That's a big project to sell. But like you were saying, Nubaid, Tottenham do have a lot of power in this situation.
If Manchester United are to come in, from what do they have to consider, Kweku?
So the messaging out of Manchester United has been pretty consistent. In the summer, they're going to go big for a striker. They brought in Wout Weghorst in January to kind of fill that gap. And they are interested in Harry Kane. When Man City were previously interested a couple of summers ago, Man United and Chelsea were also teams in that mix. Negotiations between Manchester United and Spurs have not always been straightforward. And Harry Kane is an option, but also there's a school of thought that they could opt for maybe a younger option. Harry Kane, we've talked about it before ad nauseum. He's after that goal-scoring record, saying the Premier League is probably a priority for him. And we've seen this historically. Teddy Sheringham went from Spurs to Manchester United. Man United had a record of going for best in class. We've seen Andy Cole join Manchester United when he was one of the best English strikers in the Premier League. Harry Kane will fit the profile of what Manchester United are looking for in terms of what Ten Hag needs out of a striker, in terms of what Harry Kane can bring, in terms of the hunger that he'll have at a new club. So it makes sense, it fits, but it won't be done this month. It'll be something they look at in the summer. But like you say, Spurs do hold a lot of power in this situation, because they don't have to sell Harry Kane. It's probably the onus is probably more on him to force a move, but it remains to be seen. This is the drama that's going to rumble on, because Harry Kane is one of the best players in the world, and if he does become available in the summer, there's going to be a host of clubs who are in for him.
There's a line just reaching us, and it comes from Crystal Palace. They're interested in signing Stuttgart midfielder Nairo Armada. He's a 20-year-old central midfielder. We're told he's highly regarded by the manager Patrick Vieira. Now, Palace, we know they wanted to re-sign Conor Gallagher on loan, but they feel any chance of that is extremely unlikely as it stands. But as well as a central midfielder, we're told that Palace might consider signing a forward in this window too, so one to watch. Next, Manchester United fans, we want to hear from you. Hashtag Transfer Talk. We'll be hearing from your manager, Erik Ten Hag, next. To Chelsea, they have been busy already and they're still on the lookout for more players. Only today, these are the players that they've been linked with in the past 24 hours or so. They're still in for Enzo Fernandez. We've always known that one. But Anthony Gordon could be back on the agenda. So could Amadou Onana from Everton. Malo Gusto, who's a right-back, and Moise Caicedo, the central midfielder from Brighton. So of that list there that have all been linked with today, Kweku, who should be their number one target?
Well, at the beginning of the transfer window for Chelsea, I pointed to the right-back position and centre midfield as places where Chelsea need to reinforce. So Gusto from Lyon is definitely a player that would serve a purpose at Chelsea. Azpilicueta has been an incredible servant. He's now 33 years old. Reece James is suffering from injury issues consistently. And so you need somebody who's an adequate replacement for James when he does go down injured or he is rested. And Gusto could be that option. He's young. He fits the profile of players that Chelsea are going for. So that would work. In terms of centre midfield, just take your pick, really. If you disregard finances and how much Enzo Fernandez would cost, he'd be an ideal fit for Chelsea, obviously off the back of an incredible World Cup. There was always trepidation in terms of signing players off of a good World Cup, but he's proven that he's got a little bit of everything you need in a centre midfielder, and again, fits the age profile for a player that Chelsea are looking for. So a centre midfielder and right back are the two key areas. So Enzo Fernandez and Gusto, for me, will be prime signings for Chelsea. It means they can continue the project under Potter.
We're going to come back to that in just a moment because we've got some breaking news, and we were telling you that the Villarreal forward Nicolas Jackson was wanted by Southampton. Well, it looks like he is going to the South Coast, but not to play in red and white, to play in red and black, because Bournemouth are close to finalising a deal to sign him. That's Nicolas Jackson, we're told. It is £22.5 million including add-ons. His representatives are in Villarreal now to discuss the structure of payments, as well as a sell-on clause for the Spanish club. Now, once the deal is fully agreed, he'll obviously fly to UK for medical, and one source is hopeful that that will happen in the next 24 hours. He was wanted by a number of Premier League clubs. We had been reporting Southampton, who held talks with Villarreal, but have now moved on to other targets. Southampton has, clearing the way for Jackson to sign for Bournemouth. Now, Nubaid, when we were talking about Nicolas Jackson to Southampton a little bit earlier, you actually felt that he was more of a wide forward than a striker. So would that suit Bournemouth more?
I think at the moment he plays through the middle. I think eventually that type of profile, a player that's heavily reliant on dribbling, on beating players, more often than not you see them shift to wide areas. Sadio Mane started his career playing as a number 9. Actually may end his career playing as a number 9, but for different reasons. But I think for Bournemouth, the type of profile of player they're signing, they clearly are almost following the Brighton market, but in a different region. They're sort of going after players from a certain region because maybe they feel that is the way to go. It's a lot of money to spend on a player who hasn't scored more than 5 goals in a league season yet. I wouldn't say it's one of these signings where you can immediately go, that's not going to work, because we haven't seen enough of him. He could land in the Premier League and hit the ground running, but equally at the same time, Bournemouth are throwing money at staying up in the Premier League, which you have to kind of commend, because previously they've not done that.
Well, these are the new Bournemouth American owners flexing their financial muscle, and this is a player that their South Coast rivals were interested in, and they've managed to put up the funds and bring a player in that they coveted. So it's positive for Bournemouth, especially if you're a Bournemouth fan, because it shows that you're being proactive in the market to try and stay in the Premier League. It's imperative for them to do that this season. But they are buying into potential. You mentioned it before, Nubaid. Not too sure what he is. He's 6'1", he's strong, he's athletic, but he's not prolific in front of goal. Bournemouth needs a striker to score goals. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him, whether he'll come into the starting lineup straight away. The £22 million for a striker who, like you said, hasn't scored 5 league goals in his career over the course of the season is a bit of a risk.
Also signed Dango Ouattara as well. Yeah. So they're reinventing...
It's over 40 million once this goes through.
Exactly. So they're reinventing their forward line with pace and look, their season needs a spark. They're hitting a bad run of form at a terrible time. So maybe it's just that kind of they need more sort of creativity. They need to get the ball out from the back quicker. They need to be more threatening, and that's what these two players certainly will offer.
What I will say is he played most of the last season at Villarreal B, and I remember watching him in a game, and he's got a hot temper. And I've just looked on the stats there, because in my head I was thinking, I've not seen a forward have this sort of like attitude of he wants to essentially scrap. He's got six yellows last season and 3 red cards.
I love him already. Love him.
Well, he's in for the fight for survival then in that case. We've actually got another line from Bournemouth just into us, so they are looking to be busy because they're in talks with West Ham. It's over a permanent deal to sign their goalkeeper, Darren Randolph. He's in the last 6 months of his contract at the London Stadium. And if and when the deal is agreed, he'll provide competition for Mark Travers and Neto. So he'll be coming in as one of 3 goalkeepers for Bournemouth, but they are in talks with West Ham to sign Darren Randolph. And as we've just told you, they are also looking to bring in Nicolas Jackson, the forward from Villarreal. Now, much more to come, because next we're joined by Italian football experts Mina Rzouki and Nicky Bandini. As ever on a Tuesday, we're getting some expert analysis from Italy with Nicky Bandini and Mina Rzouki. Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. Good afternoon to both of you. Before we get on to specific transfers, we're going to start with Juventus. It's been a turbulent time for them. Can you just explain the situation at the club?
Yeah, so I suppose the headline that most people have heard is that Juventus have been docked 15 points by the Italian Football Federation. This all goes back to the plusvalenza case, which is literally just means capital gains, relating to an investigation that began last year. In fact, there was a solution of 11 clubs in this case last year, including Juventus, for allegedly artificially inflating their accounts using exchange deals in which players have values placed on them that aren't real. Now, the initial case came to the conclusion that you can't rule on this because in the end, in football transfers, as we know, and we'll talk about all through these shows, you can't place an objective value on a footballer, and that's something that's abstract. Different teams will pay different amounts. What we believe has been the decision or the basis of this punishment this time around is the Turin prosecutor's office, public prosecutor, conducted a separate investigation into Juventus, did a series of wiretaps and communication interceptions that found information which made it seem as if Juventus directors suggested that they themselves thought they were inflating things and were doing things wrong. Having said that, it's really important to stress in this case, we actually don't know yet, because the punishment came down on Friday. The full verdict isn't going to be published for 10 days from that date, so we're still waiting about a week until we even have the Football Federation's actual explanation of why this punishment's been handed down.
Which is, they're obviously going to appeal this decision, Juventus, as a club, but to have been docked 15 points and then say, you need to wait 10 days until we can release why we've decided to go with this decision, especially because the prosecutor had asked for 9 points. So this is actually vastly more than was even asked for by the prosecutor. So we don't know what the decisions are. They've already got a defence strategy lined up. So this is the Sporting Justice has decided to do this for them. There could be further penalties. We don't know. Obviously, it depends on what happens in the March trial that they do have. And that's a different case altogether. They have different investigations going on with UEFA, so on and so forth. But what we know so far is that it's 15 points docked, which is a huge problem also because so many of their directors have been suspended. So effectively, they can't really do that much on the transfer market, even if they wanted to, just as an example of this, because there's really no one in power right now. It's all sort of makeshift as they try to do this. We want to say that, obviously, Juventus maintains its innocence. We still don't know what's going to happen and what will happen in the future. But until we know the reasons, all we know is that they will appeal.
Yeah, and that's it. Juventus have said they'll appeal, but once the findings are published, exactly what you said, and denying any wrongdoing, they said their accounting was in line with industry standards. You
said that 11 clubs were involved. I did actually read the story initially. But isn't it strange that Juve were the only club that got into trouble?
So this comes back to this thing about separate strands to this, and the reason that this got reopened for Juventus specifically is because the Turin public prosecutor is conducting its own investigation into statements that were made, public statements that affect the stock market because they're a publicly listed company. This is the Prisma investigation in Turin, and there's a whole separate thread to this which Mina just sort of alluded to, which is about allegedly false communications around the payment of wages during COVID. The club said that there were going to be 4 months' worth of wages given up by the players. So
additional allegations that they will then look into, which are with regards to exactly that, the salary things. But it's also, right now, all we can do is conjecture. What we as the media in Italy understand is that apparently the reasons are in the fact that they thought that with Juventus it was a systemic thing in player evaluations, which they didn't necessarily feel that. But like I said, this is purely conjecture and what we think, because like we said, we don't even know the reasons for it because they haven't been published. But that doesn't mean that those particular teams won't yet and could still suffer the consequences. This could just be the tip of the iceberg in Italian football.
I think that's a really important point to make, is that actually sort of even over the weekend, La Repubblica, big national newspaper in Italy, were reporting that Giuseppe Kane, who's the prosecutor for the Italian Football Federation, has requested information relating to a tax trial that Aurelio De Laurentiis, the Napoli owner, was involved in, which suggests that, yes, Napoli might also be a club of
dragged into this.
But this is so preliminary, and that's why it's a sort of complicated topic to talk about, especially when we've only got a few minutes here to get into it.
It also sort of begs the question that if you are going to hand out a penalty points decision, then what happens if other clubs do come into it? Do we have a legitimate table standing? Because if one club gets punished today and then another club gets punished 6 months from now, is this fair?
It could run on for quite some time. Let's get on to the transfers now. And Nicolo Zaniolo, who we've talked about on this show over the past few windows, haven't we? We've reported that Tottenham are looking at him. We've reported that AC Milan are looking at him, but only on loan. Whereas we know that Roma want a permanent deal. What's the latest, and what's Mourinho had to say?
Mourinho, I think, is generally considered to have played his hand brilliantly this weekend, because Zaniolo was called up for Roma's game against Spezia and turned down his call-up because he's agitating for a move. So, of course, it's a pretty sort of out there thing to do as a player, to say, no, I won't come and play. And Mourinho, after the game, which they won 2-0, which, of course, strengthens his hand, turned around and said, look, you're absolutely free to go. We're happy for him to go, but someone's got to pay the asking price. And my hunch is no one's doing that this transfer window. So he's kind of put it onto Zaniolo as, I don't think you've got the market that you think you do.
But this kid was considered like the next big thing in Italian football. He was phenomenal when he came across, and he was used as a part exchange deal because Monchi, at the time, the sporting director, famed for obviously his role in Sevilla and Roma then. had demanded that this player come in a player exchange deal with Raja Nangolan, who went the other way to Inter at the time. And it was like, let's bring in this player. He was called up to the Italian national team before he even played for Roma at the time. Excellent dribblist, so direct, physically capable, really could just shake off any defender at the time. Really beautiful to look at, and we thought this was it. It was him, Federico Chiesa. Italy is set for the next God knows how long. But he didn't make it to the Euros because he had an ACL injury and had another ACL injury. And now everyone's worried that we'll never see him reach the potential that he possibly has. His attitude has come into question at times. Do you think that's fair as well? I'm not...
Well, I mean, I think this weekend is one of those situations, isn't it? He's trying to force a move, but also perhaps he's raising some red flags. He's the sort of player who will refuse to go to a game which he's been called up for. Everything Mina said is accurate. You know, he's a really sort of explosive, powerful player who can be very impressive, but strangely for Roma really hasn't turned that into numbers, hasn't turned that into goals, hasn't turned that into assists. So I'm sort of with Mourinho that sort of expectation that someone's going to put 35 million, 40 million euros on the table this transfer window seems unlikely.
I would pay it.
But he's got potential. He really has got potential to be special.
Let's stay with Tottenham, because they're always in the news, mainly because Antonio Conte is at the helm. It's been a back and forth this transfer window that he's kind of said he wants to stay. There's rumours saying he wants to go. What do you expect will happen come the end of the season?
Well, I think that we were discussing this just before, and he's sort of making the type of noises that you would expect from him just before he's about to say goodbye. He started talking a lot about, and this is fair, obviously, there's been a lot of loss, especially in Italian football recently, and there's been, you know, we've lost, obviously, the likes of Pele, but it's also Sinisa Mihajlovic, and he lost Ventrone, the fitness trainer who was famed as Juventus, and then obviously was working with him, and obviously Gianluca Vialli. And so he started talking about how much it's important to spend time with his family, which he doesn't really get to do at Spurs. And I think there is a part of him that's sort of reevaluating what he wants to do and where he wants to be. So when he starts talking about this, you think to yourself, I think it's going to be over pretty soon. Also, especially if he doesn't feel that the club is in line with what it is that he wants to do. He doesn't want to necessarily... I'm sure he likes a good project, but he also needs to feel that he can win, because he's one of those competitors that feels he needs to be in a great position to target something great. Otherwise, he won't just accept where he is.
Yeah, Conte's kind of always, all of his stories at clubs seem to end the same way, which is this building frustration at not getting what he wants, and then a sort of culmination of I'm off. But it is interesting what you said about the sort of, I suppose, the bigger picture as well. I mean, he has taken breaks from football before.
Yeah, that's true.
Think of as so obsessed. He has taken breaks from clubs before.
Jakub Kiwior, now an Arsenal player, was around, about £20 million. What do you think of the fee, and how much can he help Arsenal win the league?
Slightly surprised by the fee, just because I don't think he's a player who made that big of a splash yet in Italian football, but I absolutely, we've talked about it every time I come on, I feel like there is a Premier League sort of inflation that happens when clubs sell to the Premier League now. He's certainly someone who's thought of very highly in Poland. Young defender, left-footed defender. I completely see how he fits into what Arsenal are probably looking for right now, which is a bit of depth going for this season, while also someone who in the future could mature into a starter. But he's a left-footed centre-back who can play the ball out, which is classically what you imagine Arteta would want as an alternative to Gabriel in that defence.
It's amazing because they bought him for 2.2 million. So this represents a huge profit for Spezia. But actually, on the back of what he did, he can play in midfield as a defensive midfielder. He can obviously play at the back. So he's very tactically flexible, has really grown a lot. And because of his performances for Spezia, was called up to the Polish national team. He doesn't have a low centre of gravity, which means that he can be a little bit made unbalanced. But certainly one for the future. But I think that, yeah, I'd like to see what Arteta can do with him, because he is tall and he is good with his feet. So I'm interested to see that.
Arsenal have also been linked to Weston McKennie. We obviously spoke about Juve. We didn't actually speak about what would happen because players may want to leave. Weston McKennie's not only been linked to Arsenal, but also Leeds are showing interest. Can you see him moving away from Juve? It's been said that around 15 million would do the trick.
No, I don't think it's just 15 million. I think 15 million is the most that they can accept without making any capital loss on him. So that's probably the very minimum figure. But they are looking to get more and he certainly is worth more than that. That I have to stress that. Yes, he is. Don't look at me like that. He is not going to be the most technically, profoundly beautiful player that you're ever going to watch, but he is direct and nothing intimidates him. This is what you really like about Weston McKennie. He is happy to play in a Champions League, huge game against, whoever it is. He never feels stressed out. And he came from Schalke, came to play for... It is Schalke, right? I'm starting to lose my...
Oh, Schalke.
Yeah, and then goes to Juventus. Ronaldo's there. He's sort of the happy guy in the dressing room. He really makes a wonderful atmosphere in any sort of tense dressing room. I think he's a great character to have. And honestly, Max Allegri has relied on him a lot to be that threat from midfield, to really make those runs in and try to score goals. And he was the one that got it against PSG. I think he's a great player, but they've always wanted or looked at him to be the guy they can sell because they do think that he can bring in a certain amount of money to help them and alleviate any of the financial stress that they are under right now. He's the person who has a market. He obviously wants to maintain a certain level of the club that he's moving to. Going from playing, in Champions Leagues with Ronaldo, all of that, I don't think that he wants to still be at a big club challenging for titles.
He does. And I think it's really interesting, again, I think this has been a really common theme of the last few transfer windows for Arsenal. You see the types of characters they're going for. He's a good character.
He's a
guy.
great
He's
character.
a positive person who you think would come into that dressing room and not create any sort of disruption to a team that's already going great guns in the league.
Yeah.
Mina, Nikki, as ever, magnificent. Thank you for everything this month.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Next, as promised, we are going to hear from the Manchester United manager, Erik ten Hag. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. We can hear from the Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag now, who's been speaking in the last few moments ahead of United's Carabao Cup semi-final against Nottingham Forest.
Obviously Sunday was frustrating. How have the team reacted, and how important would be making a first final at Manchester United be for this team's progress?
We left it behind. We set the right conclusions. And then we have to move forward and quickly, because tomorrow is a big game, so focus on that.
You were without a few players at the weekend. Will any of them be back? And Jadon Sancho's been back in training. Is there a chance we see him tomorrow, or perhaps is it going to be the Reading game or some other time?
No, all the players who are not available for Arsenal game, so Dalot, Martial, Sancho are also not available for tomorrow.
How important is a trophy? A lot of people talk about top four. This club wants to qualify for the Champions League and play in the Champions League. How important is winning the trophy?
It's about that. It's about winning trophies. And so we have a good opportunity, but you have to go from game to game. So now we play Forest, 2 legs. So focus on the first leg and don't think further ahead, because that will distract. And so the only aim for tomorrow is win that game.
They've got a good record recently, and also at home they seem to do very well. The atmosphere is quite intense. Have you been told about the City Ground, and have you been told about the last time Manchester United played there?
Oh yeah, it was a long time ago that United played there. But I think we liked it when a fanatic audience. It's nice to play for. It will be a good atmosphere, and I think that will motivate the players. And we have to get ready for that.
Erik, you were a little critical of your side's defending and conceding 3 goals at Arsenal on Sunday. Luke Shaw said after the game as well that they were a bit lax. Is that a major area of concern that you've been focusing on now?
No, because I think a lot of games we did very well. We have a lot of clean sheets against Man City. We defended very well. I think in general, also in Arsenal, we defended very well. I don't think they get clean shots. There was only one thing. One time was from a free kick. But for the rest, it were only shots, cutbacks, shots from distance, where a lot of defenders from us in between the ball and the goal. And that's what I meant after all the goals were avoidable. And so it can't happen. And that was my point, that you concede 3 goals. When you concede 3 goals in the top game, then it's really difficult to win a game. And that's what's happened. So that is one of the conclusions. So can't happen. We set that conclusion. We talked about, we showed them. We have to learn and to take this lesson.
So that is Manchester United ahead of their Carabao Cup semi-final. Their first leg is tomorrow night. Right, Everton fans, got a few minutes to get in touch. #Transfer Talk, because you are searching for a new manager. Marcelo Bielsa remains top of Everton's list. But Nubaid, 1, right now they don't have a manager. 2, last night on Monday Night Football, Jamie Carragher wasn't particularly complimentary, let's say, about the way the club is run. When you take all of that into account, how difficult is it for them to get in the right players in the next week?
I think the difficulty actually comes from the fact that they have spent money, in all fairness. Over the last 4 seasons, their net spend is 100 million plus, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but then equally, the feeling is that Everton haven't spent money. But if you look at the squad, Onana, who we spoke about earlier as well, he's 30 million pounds. So I don't think it's a case of they haven't spent money. I think there's certain profiles and players that they've signed who have just, they've paid too much for, and they're still at the club, and now they can't ship off and they're on big wages. So I think it's actually sort of a bit of a problem that's been building for a little period of time. They just need to go through a few transfer windows, and it doesn't help they're in the relegation battle, but go through a few transfer windows where they offload a few players. I mean, Moise Kean probably sums up the entire strategy. 25 million to sign him. He spent the last 2 seasons on loan at PSG and Juve, and I don't think he's going to come back, and they're probably going to sell him for a cut price. But you've got to get players like this off the books as fast as possible, so then you can fix the current issues. Bielsa's going to have to come in and deal with the squad he's got, and that is the reality. 7 days left of the transfer window. I don't know how much business Everton can get done.
Well, despite this, they are actually close to signing someone, Anton.
Yeah, Arnaud Danjuma, on loan from Villarreal, a straight loan, no option to make it permanent, but interesting player, isn't he? Obviously, we know him from his time at Bournemouth. He's been in a relegation scrap at Bournemouth previously. Had a good first season at Villarreal, scoring 10 league goals. This season, been more of a sort of squad player. He wants the move. He's been very keen to move back to the UK, and yeah, he's opted for Everton. You know, he wants to. I think the fight intrigues him, and I don't think that's going to be the case for every single player that Everton tried to sign over the next week. Like you said, no head coach on the back of 4 consecutive defeats, conceding 11 goals in that time. They only won 3 games in the league this season. That's a league low. So it's a difficult sell, Everton, right now. And I think previously, going back to what Nubaid was saying a minute ago, they've been able to sell, the club as a whole. Well, now people are questioning the club as a whole, and it's just going to be really difficult to get players in, for whoever the new coach is, in the next 7 days.
That's it. And then what kind of players are you going to attract? Especially there's a week left in the transfer window. We see the ticker going there. Who's going to want to come? We hear in football all the time, philosophy. Players want to come and play for coaches, and if you don't know who your coach is going to be, then are you going to be attracted to the club? And if you are, then are you coming for the right reasons? It's a difficult time for Everton right now. They need to get a head coach in ASAP.
They do, and there are conflicting reports about what's going on with Marcelo Bielsa at the moment, but he is the number 1 target. And Kweku, he has, at Leeds, when he was there, he did make a lot of players better. The current players, he did make them better.
He's the definition of a coach. If you look at the players at Leeds that he did make better, Luke Ayling, Liam Cooper, Stuart Dallas, Calvin Phillips is probably the biggest one, deemed an average Championship player. Now plays for Man City, who are champions of England. I say plays, he sits on the bench for Man City, but he's an England international, and he is a player that develops massively under Bielsa. So he's a coach that can make players better, and that's what Everton need right now, because there's not much time to bring in players that maybe fit his style of play. He needs to work with what they've got, and Nubaid's right, they need to clear house, but also they need to get the current players that they've got play into his style of football, and I think that he'd be a perfect fit. Whether they get that deal over the line in terms of bringing Bielsa in remains to be seen.
Yeah, Bradley Robson, by the way, is being in touch. I'm a diehard Everton fan. I wouldn't mind someone like Steve Bruce on a short-term deal. But in his bio, he says he's Newcastle United Football Club. Bradley, we are on to you. Right, OK, Anton, Kweku and Nubaid, thank you very much indeed. Loads still to come this afternoon on Sky Sports News. More from Erik Ten Hag, building up to that game in their semi-final tomorrow, but also tonight, Southampton against Newcastle.